anywhere. So let me get down to business and talk to you about our presenters. Let me start with Dr. Snyder. Martha Snyder is an assistant professor in the Graduate School of Computer and Information Sciences at Nova Southeastern University, and she serves as the discipline liaison for the Computing, Technology, and Education program. Prior to joining Nova Southeastern University in 2006, Dr. Snyder spent over 15 years in business and industry, primarily as an instructional designer and performance improvement and organizational development consultant. She has a master's degree in educational technology from the University of Missouri-Columbia and a doctorate from Nova Southeastern University in computing technology and education. Her research interests include instructional design theory and model building and validation, online communities of practice, and workplace learning. She's very involved in the online communities. She's a member of the Sloan-C Consortium, American Educational Research Association, International Society for Performance Improvement, and the Association for Educational Communications and Technology, and serves as a reviewer for various conferences and journals in technology and higher education. So thank you, Marty. We'll get to your presentation in a moment. And Becky Whitmore is a nurse practitioner, nurse educator in the metabolic clinic at the Oregon Health and Science University and serves as a consultant to the Oregon Newborn Screening Program. She's also an assistant professor in the online graduate public health program at the University of New England in Biddeford, Maine. So she is bi-coastal. She is completing her coursework this semester, all but the dissertation, she notes, for her doctorate in computing technology at the Graduate School of Computer and Information Sciences at Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is the connection between our two presenters today. The tutorial she will present was a course assignment that has transpired into an online tutorial for the entire catchment area for the newborn screening program. So her schoolwork had some really practical, longer-term effects. So I am going to turn the screen over to Dr. Snyder, and you can take it away and do your work. Show everybody what you're doing.
Thank you, Steve, for the lovely introduction there, and it's a real pleasure to be here today and to talk about effective design principles. Of course, that's my passion, being in education and instructional design for many, many years. So in talking about designing effective instruction, I'd first like for you all to think about this question. What is instruction? And how is it different from learning? Some of you might describe learning as a process that takes place in a variety of different settings, whether it be at school, at work, at home, or even we can learn on the playground, or our kids can. And people don't have to be in a classroom to learn, and learning can happen without any outside intervention. But in situations where learning must be facilitated, for example, the situations that we're in K through 12 public schools, in higher education, in colleges and universities, and also in businesses with the training that we provide, instruction is that facilitation of learning. And it can combine a variety of different approaches, and we're going to talk about one of those approaches today, which is specifically the tutorial. And so before I go on, Steve, would you be able to ask for a show of hands of how many people are responsible for administering, designing, or delivering instruction?
Okay, that's a good one. So I need you to go back to your panel and go to the hand-raising part. So
okay.
I can see that. So if we can do that, so what were the questions you
The question
asked?
is, how many are responsible for either administering, designing, or delivering instruction?
Okay, I'm looking at it, and it looks like about every third person on average is raising their hands.
Okay.
Or maybe close, depending. Some folks haven't responded, but it appears about 1 in 3, about 30 or 40% of our clients, of our attendees, are involved in one of those ways or another. which
Okay.
actually doesn't surprise me a great deal.
Doesn't surprise me at all either, Steve. Thank you very much for doing the poll. So in institutions in which learning must be facilitated, a systematic process is necessary. And for example, Morris and Rosenkamp in their book Designing Effective Instruction, they refer to learning as being haphazard and instruction being planned. And what that means to me is that there is a science behind instruction. There is a systematic process. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And Alessi and Trollope, the authors of the book Multimedia for Learning, note in the ongoing debate between constructivist educators and instructivist educators, instruction has been portrayed as an approach whereby knowledge is given to people, while learning is an approach whereby people obtain knowledge for themselves. Such a distinction is artificial and a misuse of semantics. The two, instruction and learning, almost always go hand in hand, and the term instruction should be understood much more generally. So therefore, Alessi and Trollope suggest that instruction is the creation and use of environments in which learning is facilitated. So today, we're going to focus on how to design effective instruction using the tutorial method. And I'm not going to talk so much. I'm going to try to limit my talk or presentation to about 10 minutes and then turn it over to Becky so she can show you how the tutorial approach is applied using SoftChalk. And the reason why I asked my students to use SoftChalk was for the very reasons that Steve indicated at the beginning of the presentation. Because SoftChalk is easy to use. It has a lot of tools that you can use to engage students and to and so that you, if you're an instructional designer or faculty member or instructor, you can focus on the design aspect. So today we're going to talk about the 4 phases of successful instruction, and then I'm going to describe the tutorial method of instruction as one effective method for facilitating learning. Some other computer-based approaches are things like drill and practice, simulations, educational games, but we're going to focus on the tutorial. And then I'm going to describe the general sequence and structure of a tutorial and its component parts. And then we'll go back and take a look at Becky's presentation to highlight how those are implemented in the design. So then that's when we're going to turn it over to Becky, and she's going to show her newborn screening tutorial and how she applied the principles using SoftChalk. And then finally, if we have some time, we'll conclude by identifying 5 tips for designing effective multimedia tutorials. So we'll go ahead and start with the 4 phases of successful instruction. And this comes from Alessi and Trollope. And they state that in order to facilitate learning in a moderately efficient way, the process must include several essential elements. And those include, first, to present information. Anytime you're teaching something new, whether it be knowledge, skills, or attitudes, the information must first be presented. And then the next phase, you would guide the learner. And this is where the learner interacts with the content in a variety of ways, including answering questions about the materials, applying certain rules to problem-solving activities, and those types of things. And then practicing is also necessary to improve the speed and fluency, and it also helps to improve retention. And some examples that we're familiar with include things like flashcards and drill and practice activities. And then finally, there's a need to assess learning. Learning is usually assessed with tests and rubrics. That's what we're most familiar with. And assessments provide information about the level of learning, the quality of teaching, and future instructional needs. So the function of the tutorial is primarily to address the first 2 phases, to present information and to guide the learner. Now, with regard to tutorials, when we think of a human tutor, the human tutor usually begins by presenting a small segment of information, or they might demonstrate a specific skill. And then the tutor will require some type of activity. So the student might answer a question or might participate in some type of way. And depending on the content that the tutor is presenting, the tutor might also ask the student to respond to a question or demonstrate the skill. So the student's performance allows the tutor to judge how well the student has mastered that newly acquired skill. And in the same way, a computer tutorial, computer-based tutorial, follows that general structure that's evident in human tutors. And like human tutors, computer tutorials are best used to address the first two phases of instruction, being presentation and guidance, to present new information, whether it be knowledge, skills, or attitudes, and then to present information that's straightforward. It's not to say you can't present information that's ill-defined or problems that are ill-defined, but it typically lends itself to presenting straightforward information. And also it's good to use with novice learners or learners that need individual guidance or remedial assistance. And it's effective in addressing the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, including knowledge, comprehension, and application. So this is the general structure, and we'll go through it piece by piece and show some quick examples. First, you have the introductory section. And this typically includes, you have the title screen, and this is just a screen capture from Becky's newborn screening, and she's used a very engaging graphic of a young child here, and also directions and help. So you want to provide some type of navigational guidance and some general directions for how to use the tutorial, and that typically comes in the introduction. And then, now this is something that's been debated, whether you include instructional objectives or not, and it really depends on your philosophy on teaching and learning. Now the reason why I like to present instructional objectives are for several reasons. First of all, it focuses the learner on the content that they're about to engage in. And it also provides an opportunity to assess the information at the very end. So it's really an advanced organizer or roadmap, so to speak. And so here we've got Becky's objectives. And then the other part, the last part in the introduction would be to gain the learner's attention. And this is wonderful up front, what Becky has done to really engage the learner at the very beginning, where she's doing a reality check on what it would be like to see or what their current feelings are regarding the importance of newborn screening in everyday practice. And so she's just asked them to choose between not important, somewhat important, to engage them right away up front. And then once you've presented the introductory information, you go into presenting the content. And I'm not going to go into detail here other than the fact that it's really important to present small chunks of information. You don't want learners to have to scroll down all the way down to the screen. You try to keep things compact so that they can see all the information on the screen. And then also if you're using multimedia elements such as audio, video, or graphics, you certainly want to make sure that the graphic complements the text on the screen. Next would be the question and response. So once you present a small chunk of information, you want to engage the learner by asking some general questions. And tutorials are not intended to be assessment tools, so to speak. They're more to help the learner understand the basic knowledge and practice that knowledge a little bit. So here's an example of one of Becky's questions, and we'll go into more detail about those questions later on when we look at her tutorial. But what I wanted to show you here too is in a tutorial and giving feedback and remediation. Of course, the human tutorial or tutor is there live to give that feedback, but the feedback and remediation here is built into the system. Now, what I like here about what Becky has done is she hasn't simply said no, wrong, incorrect. she's provided or indicated that the answer was incorrect, but also takes the opportunity to provide the formative feedback that's important for the learner. And so just a couple or 3 feedback tips here is, number 1, the feedback should be positive. And even if you're trying to be humorous, always try to keep the feedback positive. And then feedback should also be constructive to provide the learner with information that will help him or her improve. Examples that you don't want to use include wrong or incorrect or no, that's not it. But maybe something like, no, the correct answer is George Washington, or incorrect, that the notes on the treble clef are EGBDF. And then finally, immediate feedback generally works best, so you want your feedback to be timely. And then here I've indicated that you go through this presenting information, question response, judge response, and feedback and remediation several times throughout the tutorial, because again, you're wanting to present small chunks of information. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Becky so she can talk to you about her design of the newborn screening tutorial.
Okay, and as we're doing that, I'm going to launch a poll which gives a little bit more specific information than we had before about what your role is. Are you an administrator, an educator in higher ed, an educatoree? I think I have a spelling problem here. In K through 12, and an educator in another environment, or a student, so we can get a feel for who you are and what role you play. That would be really nice. And then we have another follow-up question as I turn it over to Becky. Let me turn this desktop over to Becky. And I will change the poll, close the poll about your role, and I will share it. And you will find out that there are only a few students with us. So we have several hundred people on the line with us. So we've got a handful of students and educators across the various areas that you can. Okay, that's great. I'm going to hide the poll. And I think while I've got them, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a crack at the last poll. And that has to do with how you as an educator teach, or how you as a student learn, and pick the one that is most useful in terms of what you do most of the time, even though you may do a bit of them. So if we can get that information done, it would be nice, and we can share that with our presenters today. And Becky, you should be seeing on your screen a little thing that says show my screen. So you can click on it if you haven't done it already. And let me close this poll and share it with you. And so we've got it across the board. Only 4% don't do it, don't teach, but the rest of you do it in a variety of ways. Okay, Becky, I'm going to hide back. That was our last poll. And if you say share my screen, or don't say it, click on it, we'll be able to see your tutorial. There you are. Take it away.
Yeah. And I'm going to walk through this rather quickly and from a perspective of what a student would see, and then highlight the pieces that are really easy from the SoftChalk perspective. So when students log in, this is the screen that they come to. And I'm leaving a lot of the pieces open at the top and bottom, so because there's a key point here when you're designing this, because typically this is what it'll look like when it opens. So on the first page, they have no idea. I have participants that go from knowing a lot about computers, but I have a lot out there that are in their 50-something, and those of us in that age range probably don't have the computer skills that many of you on the other end of the line do. So in this typical case, we tell them at the bottom to click the next page. So this is just our splash screen. This is another just quick introduction. And again, we tell them where to go. We tell them there's some highlighted words here in the middle, which is a wonderful tool that SoftChalk has that can give a quick text box and an easy way for them to get more definitions. And again, we tell them go to the next page. Then our next page is a navigational tool tip page that you've seen before that Dr. Snyder highlighted. But this really talks about if there's technical issues, if they can't see when they highlight over those particular highlighted words, maybe what's wrong. They need to activate the active controls. Also tell them to hit the F11 key, and all of a sudden I have a full screen, and makes it a much nicer, easier screen to read. And then on my actual page that's out there, we actually give them my contact information. And some people panic when they see this because they don't know how to exit it. So we also give them, go back up to the right-hand corner and you can exit out. So some simple things when we're designing, we need to think to that person that's doing that lowest level of getting through and navigating through your tutorial. I'm going to skip through some pages just because they're not pertinent to what we're talking about today. This gives a really quick way we can put other things in since it's a multimedia tutorial. It's really easy to hook in your audio portion just using Audacity, which many of you may be familiar with, a free software program you can get on the web. And you can actually tape and then play the audio portion. So I'm real big about stories because I think that's how people remember when they learn, especially with this group of nurses that I'm working with. So I've added the audio piece in the middle, and it's very easy to do. I am not a techie by any means. We talked a little bit, and I'm going to highlight some of these ways that we can do that question and response piece because there's so many options in SoftChalk, and you want to keep that learner engaged. So this is a simple multiple choice, and we've already talked about if they answer it wrong. I'm going to answer it correctly, and it just gives them a score down at the bottom. And I've already gone through and given a score for some other reasons that you'll see later, some pieces of SoftChalk that I find very rewarding from a learning standpoint. This screen we've already seen, which is the important screen. And we've actually changed this on the final one because I want to see this poll. And when we show you the final report that comes out, right now if I left this way about checking an answer, it's not going to show up on my final document that I get sent into my email box. But if I put this as a quick essay question, then it's going to show up in that box. And that makes more sense when we get to that particular slide. And you can use videos, and they're very easy to link in SoftChalk. And this is one quick one. I wanted to get to the emotional side of people, really upfront to say what you're doing is really important. So this is actually a quick download of online. It's from YouTube. And we actually use this to educate our patients. And this is a story about a young girl who has one particular disorder, but it talks about how the family. So it's another way of us actually building through the tutorial, and something that's it's very easy to connect to by using one of their simple tools that they have on SoftChalk. And again, I'm going to skip through a few of these. Another quiz, if they have correct answers. Let me just click on the bottom. And then it gives you the feedback. And this is just more chunking of that material. We call it, you chunk it and then do some kind of question and response. And I really worked hard to get the pages so they're all on one screen so they don't have to scroll down, because I think that's very important for this particular group. You can do matching. This is a nice example of matching. And again, it gives you something different than just that A, B, C, D all the time. Here's one that's true and false. So there's multiple ways, and I think the more ways that you can actually engage that student, and you're not having to do a lot of development. They're already made up and there for you. You just fill in the blanks, and it's very easy to do. So if some of you, that 16% that are afraid of the program, it's a very nice program, and I've actually purchased the academic model to use in some of my other classes and courses that I'm teaching, as well as this is now a really, it's much more than 21 slides now that we've done to actually put it out there.
Becky, can I chime in real quick?
Absolutely.
That previous slide is a good example of how, you may not always have to use video to put your point across. And so this is a nice way where you've combined a nice graphic, some small chunk of text, but also you use the audio to present the two different scenarios.
And while you're being interrupted, we had a couple people ask what kind of player was being used for that audio portion.
Oh, I just used Audacity.
No, that's how you created the
right, and then the player.
The player.
And I'm thinking there's a tool within. I'll have to get back with him, but I'm thinking there's a tool right there within the program.
Yeah, right. I mean, SoftChalk, what actually happens is that if you have an audio file, you can play the audio file, and whatever the browser standard for playing audio is, so it automatically populates. And
yes.
Unless there's no audio player at all in your browser, which doesn't happen because they come with that, it shows up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then this is one of my favorite activities that you have. So we have kind of a dull screen. They're going and they're listening to this video. But then we've highlighted some things on the video. And I don't want to have a bunch of pages open up to describe this. So they have a photo album activity. And this is just, it gives some nice pictures. And then you just click through it like you would a photo album. And you can put as many. Mine's very short. I have 5 different ones that we've actually used. And then I do have one where we've then taken those same pictures and asked them to identify, are there some errors with this? So they just click on them. But I think the pictures are a lot more descriptive, and they'll remember them when they actually are doing this process and say, it looks just like that one that I saw in the video. I must have done something wrong. They're not going to pick that up. Where they're going to say, oh, I remember seeing those pictures at the final end. And this is a better memory piece for them, I believe. And then we use the colors. I need to talk just briefly about the colors. The picture off to your right is our newborn screening handout that we have in all of our facilities that actually do the newborn screening. So originally I started out with that lovely green underneath the baby there. And it was a little bit overwhelming to open every page and see the green. So then in SoftChalk you can actually do this. I didn't have to do any special designing. It actually comes and you can kind of move pieces around, and it's not a difficult process. So we pick those other colors. So this is kind of our theme that we use for everything that goes out from our newborn screening program. So that was one easy way. And to build on foundational pieces, people already know all about this particular handout. So if they can see it, and then I can have the understanding that there's more to it, but I already know that piece. So we're building on their foundational knowledge that they have. And then the March of Dimes is a nice little video that they actually have in their facilities in a CD-ROM format. So again, we're giving them some familiarity of that, but we're also linking it to why it's important. And then these are more quizzes. These ones are correct answers, so they're not just A, B, C, but mark all of them that are correct. And then the second quiz down here, open for me, is actually where I wanted to go a little bit deeper in Bloom's taxonomy to say, I want you to integrate that and then tell me what you would do. So do some decision making. What if this particular case study happened? What would you do? And this one actually is where this actually gets sent to me. And I'll show you how that works. The SoftChalk is already in the program, and it sends a final report to me so I can read what their answers are. And it gives me a good idea, do I need to go back and actually do something different in my tutorial to make sure that my students have a good understanding of this particular piece.
The other thing that you could do here is if you're wanting to provide immediate feedback, because when you think of tutorials, we think of the true, false, the multiple choice, but you can certainly be creative and provide these scenarios and have them type in their response. And then if you wanted to give them immediate feedback, you could have them click on an expert response. And so they would type in their response and compare it to the expert response.
I'm going to skip over a few other pages, just because they're giving you just some of that chunk material. Then one piece I had to do, simply because of where I'm going to be using this, is actually I needed to have an evaluation for these participants to receive their continuing education. So an easy way is it's just linked right in here is my Word document. So this will open up for them, maybe. It'll actually just open up and they can actually see the, it's like banging out for me. I'm going to close that because it doesn't like what I'm doing there. But it's actually just a Word document, evaluation that they're going to then download and send off to me. And that's just because it's something outside of the tutorial because we're using this to give them continuing education. And then my other screens are acknowledgments. I always include just a quick reference list of, because someone's going to say, where did you get that material? So these are some quick references for them. And this is one part that I really, really like with SoftChalk. So they're going to submit their score, and they just click on that after they identify who they are. Click on it, it submits a score to me, it emails the score, and then it'll print the certificate. So they'll get a nice little certificate, and then I'm going to send them an official one. But if they need something right away, this is a nice, easy way for them to actually have that, that piece. And so that completes it. And I'm going to show you one other piece, and that is what it looks like when I get an email back. So this is an email saying that someone had completed it, who it was completed by, BJE, and then what their score was. And then the important time is how long it took to spend on that lesson. So I want to find out, are they really listening to what we put out there, or are they just going through the motions? And then the essay responses, these are the two pieces where they actually type something in, so then we can get a good idea, are they truly understanding those pieces? So that's all I have. So I'm going to turn it back over to Steve.
Okay, well, thank you, Becky. We've got a bunch of questions, so I'm going to leave the presenter on you for the moment, Becky. And if we need to move back and forth, we will. I'll eventually take it over because I want to show folks how they can find out more information about SoftChalk and how they can get hold of the archive. This session is being recorded, and by tomorrow we will have it right, on our website. And you'll all get an email that will say, thank you for attending, and this is where the recording is available. So you can tell your friends that they missed a really great presentation, and this is the way to get to it. I've got a question, and I think maybe I'm not understanding the question. That it seems that this is a very one-on-one kind of lesson to some people. They generally do it to one student at a time. And my response to that was, if you're showing the lesson on an electronic whiteboard, a smart board, then yeah, one student at a time would go to the board, although you can mix and match when you're in the classroom and pull different people up. But if this is a web-based lesson, then thousands of students could use it.
Right, and mine is what we've done with this is it's actually a web-based, so they go into a portal where they register for the course because they're getting continuing education credits for it. So we actually have them go into a web portal, so it is one-on-one. They're just sitting at their computer and they're doing it as a tutorial for a single one person.
And
yeah,
that is go ahead.
Yes, but many people can be doing this one-on-one kind of work.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yes, okay. Marty, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, that was, and that's really the purpose of a tutorial, is either something that's presented one-on-one or small group. But again, it doesn't mean that you can put it out on the web and have several people taking it.
We just got a question from Juan asking if the submission and the certificate printing are features of SoftChalk.
Yes.
Yes, and
yes. And it's very easy to set up. Very easy. And there's a link in there at the very end, and you set it up. And I did not do anything. This actually, the final page here that I have is actually the format that comes from SoftChalk. So when we look at the final certificate, this is actually one that I haven't done anything to. And that's how it looks when you finalize
And
it.
you can email your score to your to the instructor as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can do that.
Yes.
And the certificate only says that you passed by a certain percentage. And if you email the scores, you can get actually the more details of the scores. So there's a couple different ways on how that can work. Where else we go? What web portals do you use? Is it a portal provided by an LMS? Are you using a web portal? I don't know that I saw one.
I don't have this connected. I actually just went directly. But we're actually, because I didn't want to go through we use BigBrain, which is our education portal here at OHSU. So our students log in through that system. And then, so it's an LMS system that this particular tutorial has been downloaded to.
Okay, and how do you prevent students from skipping the lesson and printing a certificate of completion?
Well, they have to get a score. So this is where Steve talked about the score. So they could skip through it, but look at it. It tells me how much time they spent in there. So you can tell exactly. Now, it could be that they're doing something else where they're supposedly watching the tutorial, and there's no way that I know of to go in and actually say, have they actually listened to each slide and each piece. But this gives me a general idea of how long they've spent in there. And I know there's other methods out there that are being developed to actually have people continue to check in certain times. But we've kind of done that with that small response and feedback question time.
Right, and in fact, this score summary shows that they got all 24 out of 24 points. So even if they spent an hour making cookies in the other room and came back and went to the last page, it would show that they spent an hour in the lesson but hadn't done anything.
Correct.
So there is that. You know, in an online environment, there's certain things that you can get around to in a different way. So the question I think I just answered is, can you restrict them from getting the certificate if they got a lower score? So yeah, you are setting, when you created in SoftChalk, you set the thresholds. You don't see that in the interface right that you're looking at, but there is a threshold that has been set when Becky created the lesson in SoftChalk.
And I created a 70 because I have one in there that I know is really tricky where they have to do some matching when they watch this video, the long video from New York State on newborn screening process, and that has a lot of matching, and they have to prioritize from 1 to 8. So I give them a 70 because if they miss 1 or 2 in that link, then it pulls their grade way down.
Okay, there's questions which are sort of ones that are always asked about online education. You know, how can you prevent students, how can you be sure students are doing their own work? And, you know, I don't know when it's a remote site.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think the more you know the student and the certain structure that you put in place, like Becky did, to prevent that from an instructor standpoint, unless you have you know, other technology that you can use, eye scanning or whatever they use these. But the more that you can get to know the student and you know, multiple choice, anybody can click A, B, or C. But if you provide questions where they have to craft responses, those are ways that you might be able to get a better understanding, or you know, to ensure that the student is actually doing the work. But other than that, I really don't have the expertise with regard to ensuring that the person on the other end is actually the person taking the exam or the instruction.
The age-old dilemma of online learning.
And that's the best answer I can provide, and that's a really good question.
Right. I mean, one comment by Susan is that if you use a learning management system, there is some level of security, you know, ID, password, et cetera,
right.
to get in. So
right, Susan.
you know who the student claims to be, and would be in real trouble if they got caught not, you know, logging into another account. I know that, you know, my wife works at a university and is responsible for the Blackboard learning management system, and there's been some serious issues with students, and when caught, they can leave campus.
Right. And some other ways to prevent that, what I'm seeing, is to provide the information up front when you're developing your syllabus. direct attention to the importance of doing your own work and plagiarism, because the more that you create awareness about the policies, the studies have shown that the the less apt they are to cheat.
There's a question here from Caleb asking about, is there a way to keep a person from advancing unless they pass the unit? And the answer is yes and no. SoftChalk does not provide that service, but many learning management systems do. So you can put in lessons into your learning management system and then have the rules set up within Blackboard about Blackboard or other learning management systems. That's the one that I know better. We just talked to the folks at Web Study today who have a very nice learning management system, and they set up the same thing. So it's not something that SoftChalk does, but a good learning management system will allow you to release the lessons when some criteria has been set.
Yeah, and it might be like a score. I do use that in Blackboard when I do teach online. I have to get a certain score on a particular section before the next section will open, and it works relatively well.
Right. There's a couple questions about recording your own voice, playing audio, how that works, and you mentioned Audacity, but there's several tools that are around that you can create your own audio files and then bring them into your lesson in a variety of ways. As a matter of fact, we have a slideshow in SoftChalk that you can do. You can do a slideshow, and a piece of the slide, you have an image, and then you have an audio track that you can create with Audacity or a bunch of different tools and bring into the lesson. Somebody asked, and as questions go by, I'm not sure that I can find it anymore, but they asked about how difficult it is to create those audio files and make them part of, however lessons you want to use, whichever they are, wherever they are in the lesson.
I found that they're relatively easy. Audacity is very easy to use, and then to import them was not difficult at all. Mine was not using my ums, and so I think I recorded it a million times to get some of those. So it was more of my own capability of not transmitting my voice the way that I wanted it to appear when I finally, but the actual physical technical part of it was very easy.
Right.
And I am not a techie. I have no background. I have that medical health care background. So this was something that was very frightening when it was presented to me, but it's something that I'm using in my other courses. So it's something that you can learn. So that part, I wouldn't get over upset about thinking about that piece and not being able to do it. It's a very easy process, I think.
And Nancy asked if Dr. Snyder can recommend a book or article about best practices for tutorial design.
Well,
or should they just go through your PowerPoint slideshow again?
Actually, one that, not specifically about tutorials, but about effective design, I use Morrison, Ross, and Kemp designing. It's actually Morrison, Ross, Kemp, and Kalman, Designing Effective Instruction, is a really good book. And Alessi and Trollope, I don't even know if that book is available anymore, but you might be able to find it. Alessi and Trollope's multimedia, interactive multimedia, multimedia for learning methods and development. And then there's another one by Mishra and Sharma called Interactive Multimedia in Education and Training. So those are three that might get you started.
Okay.
And then I used Vaughn, which is Multimedia Making It Work, but really it goes into a lot of the technical side of it, so it really doesn't talk about the design piece from an education standpoint, but it was more how to make, the colors work and the fonts work. And
right.
So that one was kind of helpful because I didn't have that background. So I did use the Vaughn textbook, but really we followed the other two textbooks that Dr. Snyder talked about, to develop the whole needs assessment and the design document. This is just a final product of a whole, stack of other pieces to make this tutorial. It's not just something that's thrown up there. It has the whole pieces behind it to support why it looks the way it does.
And I have a question from Deb, and this is mostly directed towards Marty, I believe. Okay. Okay, let me read it in full. The question is for the first presenter, Marty. As a Writing Center director, I encourage my tutors to use non-directive methods of tutoring whenever possible, guiding students to think through the problems they confront with writing and rhetoric. Is there a way to do this in an asynchronous online environment, or is she just a dreamer?
In an asynchronous online environment?
Right.
Or using SoftChalk?
Well, I mean, the content you're creating is with SoftChalk, but when the student views it, it's asynchronously. So are there methods to go through, as I say, guiding students to think through the problems they confront with writing and rhetoric? And
I'm not sure that can be done through SoftChalk, but it could be in combination with SoftChalk, where you might present some of the information up front and then use some type of asynchronous discussion to guide them through the problem. And I guess, and I tell you, if the person, Deb, would like to email me the scenario, I could certainly work through it with her, because that sounds very interesting.
Right. I mean, there's online office hours and all kinds of things that you can set up tutors in if that's the way it is. But there are ways in SoftChalk of submitting essay-type questions. So if
yes,
you,
absolutely. Yes.
In a writing mode, if you set up a situation, you can certainly get that kind of feedback through the essay question in SoftChalk.
Okay. Sure. Sure. Right.
Okay. And I always love, because people love to make comments about other resources. You talk about Audacity, and a lot of people, I couldn't hear them, but I could feel them writing it down. And somebody, and Annalise suggests shoestringmedia.org for lots of free and or easy tools for all sorts of media stuff. So I don't know shoestringmedia.org, so I will try that out myself.
I will definitely try that out. Anything's free. Anything's free, that's for sure. That's there are a lot of really good tools out there.
Right, right. Let's see what we have. I know no, I think we've gone through. There's so many questions here, and one of the things I want to say, actually, one of the questions has to do with ADA compliance, or accessibility issues.
Mm-hmm.
They asked, do you have to type scripts for audio, video, and alternative text for images? And the question, have to? I guess the answer to that is yes. One of the things SoftChalk creates is anytime you have content in which there's an accessibility question, they give you tools to provide alternate text, to insert alternate audio, however you want to do that. So the tool is easy to use to fortify the content so that a variety of learning styles and accessibility issues can be made. But is it automatic? No, there are some tools out there that claim that they can take and make a narration from a soundtrack of a video file, and YouTube actually provides that services, although I'm not sure how good it is. So there are a variety of ways you can do that. Let's see if I can. Asking whether you're using a learning management system as you get when you provide this information.
Yeah, and we're using what's called Big Brain. It's what we use here at the university. You mentioned that. Yeah.
You mentioned that. And somebody's asking about what material provided by SoftChalk to get user proficient in using SoftChalk. So, I'll answer that in a moment, because I might want to make sure while we have our presenters that I've asked all the questions I can find, and I don't want to leave people saying, he didn't get to my question, but there might be somebody that I didn't. Oh, I have a question for you, and then we're going to go to sort of wind things down. Somebody asked whether or not the slideshow would be made available, and that's Marty's slideshow. And you can't actually make Becky's slideshow available because it wasn't a slideshow, it was an online demo. But as I said before, we are recording all of this, so you can go back and find that. And also, at the very end, I'm going to give you Dr. Snyder's and Becky's email, so you can contact them directly with that kind of information. So I'm going to take this presenter back, and hopefully you can see my screen. And I want to talk to you about the other things you can learn about SoftChalk. Several people asked about how to get education, how to get more training and learning. Well, you know, we are doing this Innovators and Online Learning series, but I'm not going to show you all this. I am going to go to our website. And in our website, under the demo tag, is the online demos, which you're seeing now. These demos, which we do at least once a week, giving a basic introduction. We have a new product called SoftChalk Connect, which is digital learning object repository that we are having webinars on. And you see the webinar you've just attended, our Innovator series, is here, and next month's session is already there. And I think that anybody who's interested in sports and learning, I think that's going to be a really excellent session for you. Going to the top, we are archiving all of these things, all these webinars. So go to the archive page and you'll see the last few that we've done. And in fact, and I have not talked to Becky and Marty about this yet, but we asked our presenters to do like a 5 to 8 minute quick view so that people really get to know what the presentation is about, and then they can view the entire presentation. We offer training, short courses. Somebody says, okay, I want to get quickly up to speed, and if I have a question, how do I do it? Well, we have a great FAQ system. We have guides, or user's guide that's wonderful, but we also have 1 hour topic-driven webinars that are no cost, so you can get that information as well. And if you want to look at sample lessons to get a sense for what that's like, you can go ahead and do that. And one thing is, I will click on this and I'll show you the lesson challenge. We are actively doing that right now, so that if you have really good lessons, you can win $500 in up to 3 different categories. And the last few years' winners, are on our website. So if you want to look at some really quality lessons from our users, just go down and pursue that on our website. And I think actually this is our FAQ page and everything, but what I really want to show you is you can download the free trial. You can just buy it if you want to. We have the lesson challenge I just talked about. And the last thing I want to talk about is that, go to the last screen, that SoftChalk is the proud winner of 2 very prestigious awards in 2 consecutive years. In 2009 and 2010, we won the SIIA Cody Award. So those are like the Academy Awards for the software industry. So we've won them in 2 different categories for 2 years in a row, and we're trying again in 2011. But to kind of wind up, because we're at the hour, and I'm sorry that I missed some questions, and I might be able to go back and get to them later on. And this is the way to get hold of us. If you are interested in talking to me, there's my email address. And if you want some more information about the product, contact our sales team either by email or by using our toll-free number. You know, Dr. Snyder, Ms. Whitmore's email is here. You will also get a follow-up email telling you should come tomorrow with their email addresses embedded into it, as well as the link to the archive.